The ring didn't fit right. It never had. Rosa Vega knew that the moment she found it, wedged between a cracked floorboard and a rusted pipe beneath the stairwell of the Castellano estate, half buried under years of dust and forgotten silence. A thin gold band. A single diamond, small but perfect, catching the last gray light of a December afternoon in New York City like it had been waiting there on purpose, waiting for someone to find it. She should have turned it in. She knew that. She was 22 years old, 5'3", wearing a second-hand coat with a broken zipper and shoes that let the cold in through the left sole. She had been cleaning these marble floors for 11 days, since the agency sent her over as emergency placement after the last housekeeper disappeared without explanation. 11 days of looking straight ahead, speaking only when spoken to, eating her lunch on the back steps alone, because the kitchen staff had made it quietly but perfectly clear that a girl from the South Bronx with no references and no family name was not someone they needed to know. She should have turned it in. She put it on instead. Just for a moment, she told herself, just to feel what it felt like to wear something that beautiful. She was standing alone in the basement corridor, no cameras on this level. She had already learned which halls had eyes and which ones didn't. The ring slid onto her right hand, slightly loose, and Rosa held it up in the dim light and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Like she existed. Like she was a person who mattered to someone. She did not hear him coming. No one ever did. The footsteps that appeared at the top of the stairs were not the footsteps of a housekeeper or a kitchen boy or the estate manager who smelled of cigarettes and watched her a beat too long whenever she bent to mop. These footsteps were slower, heavier, each one landing with the absolute certainty of a man who had never in his life been required to announce himself. Dante Castellano stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, dark suit, no tie, his sleeves rolled to the forearm despite the cold. 41 years old, with a face cut from something harder than grief and eyes the color of ash after the fire has gone out. A scar ran along his left jaw, thin and white and old. He did not look like a man who frightened easily. He looked like a man that other frightening men were afraid of. His eyes went to her hand, to the ring on her finger. The air in that corridor dropped 10 degrees. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet it was almost gentle. Almost. Who gave you permission to touch that? Rosa Vega could not breathe. She could not speak. She could not move. But she did not take the ring off. The silence between them lasted exactly 4 seconds. Rosa counted them the way a person counts seconds during a blackout, not by choice, but because the mind needs something to hold on to when everything else has stopped working. 1. The scar on his jaw caught the light. 2. His eyes did not move from the ring. 3. The basement corridor, which had always felt merely cold, now felt sealed, like a room that had decided neither of them was leaving until something was resolved. 4. Dante Castellano tilted his head exactly 1 degree to the left. "Take it off," he said. Still quiet, still almost gentle. That was the part that terrified her most, not volume, not fury, not the thing she had been bracing for since his foot hit the bottom stair. The quiet, the absolute absence of urgency in his voice, as though he had all the time in the world and was entirely unbothered by that fact, because men like him always did, and men like him always were. Rosa's right hand moved to her left. Her fingers found the band. And then something happened that she could not explain, then or later. In the weeks that would follow, when she would replay this moment, so many times the memory wore thin at the edges like an old photograph. Her fingers stopped. The ring stayed on. And Rosa Vega, 22 years old, South Bronx, broken zipper, bad left shoe, no references and no family name, looked Dante Castellano directly in the eye. "I found it on the floor," she said. "Under the 3rd stair from the bottom. It was going to get swept out with the rest of the dust." Not an apology, a fact. Something shifted in his face. Not softening, nothing about Dante Castellano softened. It was more like a door, somewhere deep behind his eyes, cracking open 1/2 inch, enough to let light through, not enough to see inside. He crossed the corridor in 4 steps. Not fast, not slow. The walk of a man who had learned long ago that speed was something you used when you were uncertain. and he was never uncertain. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could see the fabric of his suit was expensive in the way that whispered rather than announced, close enough that she could smell something faintly beneath the cold air of the corridor, cedar and something older, something that reminded her without reason of churches. He looked at the ring on her finger. For a long time, he looked at nothing else. Rosa held her hand still through sheer force of will. She would not shake. She had made herself that promise 4 years ago in a different cold room, and she had kept it every day since, and she was not going to break it now in front of this man, in this basement, wearing a dead woman's ring. "Where exactly?" Dante said. "Under the 3rd stair." "Left side. There's a gap where the board has pulled away from the riser, maybe half an inch. The ring was wedged in the back of it." She paused. "Someone would have vacuumed over it for another 10 years and never known." He was quiet for a moment. "How long have you worked here?" 11 days. "And you found in 11 days what my staff did not find in 3 years." It was not a question. Rosa did not answer it like one. "I clean differently," she said. "I start from the bottom." The door behind his eyes opened another half-inch. He reached out his right hand, palm up, and waited. Rosa looked at his hand. She looked at the ring. Then, slowly, she slid it from her finger and placed it in his palm. His fingers closed around it. He stood there holding it, and for just a moment, a single, unguarded moment that Rosa would carry with her for the rest of her life, his expression broke. Not collapsed, not crumbled, but broke, the way a stone breaks when something inside it that has been under pressure for too long finally shifts. It lasted less than 2 seconds. Then it was gone, locked back behind the ash-colored eyes and the carved face and the silence that surrounded him like a second suit. He turned without another word and walked back to the stairs. He was on the 3rd step when he stopped. He did not turn around. "What is your name?" he said. "Rosa Vega." A pause. "Don't clean the basement tomorrow, Rosa Vega. Start on the east wing, 3rd floor." Another pause, shorter. "You'll find more that way." Then he continued up the stairs, and his footsteps moved away down the marble corridor above her, steady and unhurried, and the basement corridor slowly, reluctantly, let the air back in. Rosa stood alone under the fluorescent light, her right hand still slightly raised, her fingers still curved in the shape of the ring that was no longer there. She did not know whose ring it was. She did not know what she had just seen pass across the face of the most dangerous man in New York City. She did not know that the diamond in that ring had been placed on another woman's hand in this very house, in a ceremony Rosa had never witnessed, by a man who had not smiled before that day and had not smiled properly since. She did not know any of that yet. What she knew was this: she had looked Dante Castellano in the eye and she had not looked away first, and she was still standing. And somewhere above her, in a house that had been cold for 3 years, a door had opened half an inch. She picked up her mop. She started from the bottom. 9 years earlier, Rosa Vega had learned that love was something you made with your hands. Her grandmother, Cecilia Vega, had believed this the way other people believed in God, not as an idea, but as a practice. Something you did every single day whether you felt like it or not. Cecilia ran a small alterations shop on the ground floor of their building on Prospect Avenue in the South Bronx, a narrow room that smelled permanently of pressed cotton and the lavender sachets she kept in every drawer. She took in hems, replaced buttons, restored old garments that other people had given up on. She charged less than she should have and gave more than she needed to, and at the end of every month the numbers never quite added up, and she never once mentioned it. Rosa grew up behind the counter of that shop, watching her grandmother's hands. They were small hands, quick and certain, and they moved through fabric the way water moves through a familiar riverbed, without hesitation, without waste. Cecilia had taught Rosa to sew before she taught her to read. A seam holds 2 things together that cannot hold themselves, she used to say, threading a needle without looking. That is all love is, a good seam. Rosa's parents were gone before she was old enough to miss them specifically. Her father left when she was 3. Her mother followed 2 years later, though not by choice, a January night, a patch of black ice on the Cross Bronx Expressway, and a phone call that Cecilia took standing at the kitchen counter and answered with yes. "I understand. Thank you," and then hung up and stood very still for a long time before she turned around and found Rosa watching from the doorway. Cecilia never cried in front of her, not once. She simply woke up the next morning and opened the shop. That was the inheritance Rosa received. Not money, not a name that opened doors, just the knowledge that you woke up and you opened the shop and you started from the bottom and you made yourself useful, and if the seam held, then the day had been worth something. When Rosa was 18, Cecilia sat her down at the work table after closing and placed something in her hands. A ring. Gold band, single small diamond, simple and perfect. "This was your mother's," Cecilia said. "She gave it to me to keep safe when things got hard between her and your father. I kept it too long. It belongs to you now." Rosa wore it every day for the next 2 years. Until the night 3 men followed her home from the laundromat on 167th Street, and she fought back hard enough to get away, but lost the ring somewhere in the dark between the corner and the door. She had been looking for it ever since. She had never told anyone what it looked like. Cecilia Vega died on a Tuesday morning in March, 7 months after Rosa lost the ring. She went the way she had lived, quietly, without making a fuss, in her own bed with the window cracked open the way she always kept it regardless of season, because she believed rooms needed to breathe. The shop was left to Rosa in a will written on a single sheet of paper in Cecilia's precise, unhurried handwriting. The building's landlord tripled the rent 4 weeks later. Rosa held on for 3 months, taking every job the agency sent, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating once a day and calling it a choice. Then the shop closed, and with it the last address in the world that had ever felt like home. That was when Marco Reyes found her. He came into her life the way trouble always comes, wearing the face of the thing you needed most. Rosa had taken a waitressing shift at a midtown restaurant to cover the gap between agency jobs. Marco sat at her table on a Wednesday, ordered coffee he barely touched, and stayed for 2 hours asking questions that felt, for reasons she could not immediately name, like being seen rather than surveyed. He was 34, handsome in an easy, undemanding way. He said he worked in property management. He said he had grown up without much. He said, and this was the thing that reached into Rosa's chest and rearranged something, "I know what it looks like when a person is holding everything together by themselves. I've been that person. You don't have to be." 6 months he courted her. 6 months of dinners and patient conversations and the specific tenderness of a man who seemed to understand, without being told, exactly where the bruises were. Rosa did not fall in love so much as she slowly, cautiously, lowered her guard 1 inch at a time until she realized the guard was gone and it was too late to rebuild it. They married quietly. A courthouse, 2 witnesses, lunch afterward. The first month was fine. The second month he asked her to stop taking agency shifts because he made enough for both of them and it looked, he said, like she didn't trust him. Rosa stopped taking shifts. The third month he began checking her phone. Not aggressively, just glancing at it when it lit up, asking casually who had texted, mentioning twice that he'd noticed she hadn't mentioned certain conversations. By the 6th month he was drinking. By the 9th month his apologies had a pattern. Specific, detailed, convincing apologies, the kind that took preparation, delivered with the eyes of a man who meant every word. Rosa counted them the way Cecilia had counted stitches. 14 apologies in 11 months. 14 times she believed him. The 15th time, she stopped counting. Because the 15th time, he took her hands, the hands Cecilia had taught to sew, the hands that knew how to hold things together, and he told her she was nothing without him. And somewhere in the city, in a house she had never seen, a ring sat under a broken floorboard and waited. Dante Castellano had not opened his wife's jewelry box in 3 years. It sat on the dresser in the master bedroom of the estate, a small rosewood case with a brass clasp, exactly where Alina had left it the morning she died. Everything else in that room had been touched at least once since then. The sheets changed, the curtains replaced, the mirror cleaned by staff who moved through the space with the careful efficiency of people working around an unexploded device. But the jewelry box had not been moved, had not been opened. had not been acknowledged by Dante or anyone in his employ in 1,094 days. He had counted them. Dante Castellano had built his empire the way men build things when grief is the only fuel they have left, relentlessly, without pause, without the luxury of stopping to feel what the work was costing him. He had inherited a fractured organization at 31 when his father died of a stroke mid-negotiation at a restaurant table, and he had spent the following decade turning fracture into fortress. Territory secured, rivals absorbed or eliminated. A name that now moved through certain rooms the way weather moves. You did not see it coming until you were already inside it. Elena had been the only person who ever made him sit still. They had met when he was 26, already dangerous, already closed. She was a school teacher from Queens who had rear-ended his car on the BQE during a rainstorm and gotten out to inspect the damage wearing an expression of such complete, unself-conscious irritation that he had laughed for the first time in 2 years. She never feared him. She never pretended not to know what he was. She simply decided, with the same calm certainty she brought to everything, that the man inside the thing he had built was worth the excavation. She was right. She was always right. She died 37 months ago, an aneurysm, fast and without warning on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. She had been reading at the kitchen table. The book was still there, still open to page 214, because Dante could not make himself close it. After Elena, the house became a place he inhabited rather than lived in. Cold, precisely maintained, emptied of everything that had once made it feel inhabited by someone who loved it. Her ring he had removed from her finger himself, at the hospital, before anyone could suggest otherwise. He had carried it in his jacket pocket for 6 months. Then he had come home one night, exhausted in a way that sleep could not touch, and sat on the bottom basement stair, the place he used to sit as a boy in his father's house when the world above felt too loud, and held the ring a long time. He did not remember setting it down. He had spent 3 years believing it was simply gone. Until a girl from the South Bronx, who cleaned from the bottom up, put it on her finger. And did not look away. 3 weeks after Rosa found the ring, Marco came to the estate. She did not know how he found her. She had not told him where the agency had placed her, had not told him much of anything in the 2 weeks since she had packed one bag at 6 in the morning while he slept and walked out of their apartment on West Fordham Road without leaving a note. She had learned, in 11 months of marriage to Marco Reyes, that notes gave men like him something to argue with. Silence gave them nothing. She had believed, cautiously, that she was safe here. She was wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon, the estate quieter than usual, most of the staff given the half-day. Rosa was working the East Wing 3rd floor, Dante's instructions, followed every day since the basement, when the estate manager appeared in the doorway with an expression that sat uncomfortably between apology and relief that the problem was not his to solve. "There is a man at the front gate," he said. "He says he is your husband." Rosa set down her cloth. She did not allow herself the full weight of what she felt in that moment. She simply noted it, the way you note weather, cold front, moving fast, already here, and made the calculation she had learned to make quickly over 11 months. How loud was he? How much had he had? How much time did she have before loud became something else? "How does he seem?" she said. The estate manager paused 1 beat too long. "Send him away," Rosa said. "Tell him I don't work here, tell him anything." "He is being," another pause, persistent. She was already moving toward the stairs. She did not make it to the ground floor. Marco had gotten past the gate the way Marco always got past things. Not with force, not initially, but with the specific social fluency of a man who had spent years learning how to seem reasonable to everyone except the person he came home to. He was standing in the marble foyer when Rosa reached the bottom of the staircase, his coat damp from the cold outside, his eyes doing the thing they did when he had been drinking just enough to feel certain, bright and very still, like something sighted at the end of a scope. "There she is," he said and smiled. Rosa stopped 4 steps from the bottom. She held the banister. She did not go to him. "You need to leave," she said. "You need to come home." He said it pleasantly, the way you correct a small misunderstanding. Rosa, come on, this is embarrassing. You work for these people. I'm your husband. You need to leave this property. His smile thinned at the edges. I'm not leaving without. She said leave. The voice came from the corridor to the left. Not loud, not urgent. The voice of a man stating a fact about the weather to someone who had foolishly chosen not to bring an umbrella. Dante Castellano walked into the foyer and stopped. He did not look at Marco immediately. He looked at Rosa first, at her hands on the banister, at the 4 steps of distance she had kept, at the specific stillness of a woman who had learned to make herself very small and very quiet when a certain kind of man entered a room. He looked at all of that in approximately 2 seconds. Then he looked at Marco. Marco looked back. Rosa watched him recalibrate in real time, the smile adjusting, the posture shifting, the social fluency kicking in as he extended a hand and said, I'm sorry to intrude. I'm Marco Reyes, Rosa's husband. I just came to. I know why you came. Dante did not take the hand. You came because she left and you needed to confirm that she was somewhere you could reach her. A pause, quiet as the space between heartbeats. She isn't. Marco's hand dropped. The smile dropped with it. With respect, he said, and his voice had changed now, the pleasantness gone, the certainty underneath it surfacing like something that had been waiting. She is my wife. Whatever arrangement she has here. There is no arrangement, Dante said. There is only this. You are standing in my house. You were not invited into my house. And you will leave my house in the next 30 seconds or you will be removed from it. He tilted his head 1 degree. Those are the only options available to you. Marco stared at him. Rosa watched Marco understand, slowly and then all at once, that the social fluency that worked on gatekeepers and estate managers and the 11 months of Rosa's silence did not work here. That the certainty he carried into every room as his primary weapon had just met something older and heavier and entirely unmoved by it. He looked at Rosa. One last time, the eyes doing the thing, the appeal, the accusation, the specific look that said you are doing this, you are the cause of this, you will regret this, all of it compressed into a single glance, delivered with the precision of long practice. Rosa looked back at him from 4 steps up. She did not look away first. Marco left. The foyer was quiet. The front door settled into its frame. Outside, through the tall window beside the door, Rosa watched the shape of him move down the drive and through the gate and out of sight, and felt something she did not immediately have a name for. Not relief exactly. Not yet. Something earlier than relief. Something that felt like the first breath after a long time underwater. She became aware that Dante was still in the foyer, still watching her. She turned. He was looking at her with the ash-colored eyes, and the door behind them was open, wider now than half an inch, wide enough to see that whatever was on the other side of it was not cold. Are you all right? He said. Not you're safe now. Not he won't bother you again. Just the question, plain and direct, asking only what it asked. Rosa considered it honestly. I will be, she said. He nodded once, as though that was the right answer, the only answer worth giving. Then he turned toward the corridor. Rosa Vega, he said without looking back. Yes. You have a job here as long as you want one. The East Wing, 3rd floor. A pause. Start from the bottom. He walked away. And for the first time in 11 months, Rosa Vega stood in a room after a man had left it and felt larger, not smaller. She went back upstairs. She started from the bottom. 8 months later, Rosa Vega opened a shop. It was small, a single room on the ground floor of a building on Prospect Avenue, 4 blocks from where Cecilia's alterations shop had stood. The walls were freshly painted. The window was clean. A second-hand sewing machine sat on the work table beside a pincushion Rosa had made herself from scraps of fabric saved from 11 different jobs across 4 years of starting over. Above the door, in letters she had stenciled by hand on a Saturday morning, while Dante stood in the doorway pretending to read a newspaper and watching to make sure she didn't fall off the stepladder. A name. Cecilia's. She charged less than she should have. She gave more than she needed to. At the end of every month, the numbers never quite added up, and she never once mentioned it. She had learned that from the best. 3 women worked alongside her now. Each of them had arrived the way Rosa had once arrived at the Castellano estate. One bag, no note, the specific stillness of someone who had learned to make themselves small. Rosa did not ask them to explain. She showed them the sewing machine and said, "I'll teach you," and started from the bottom. Marco Reyes had accepted a plea agreement in September. 18 months probation, mandatory counseling, a restraining order Rosa had framed and put in a drawer not to look at, but to remember that the system, when pushed hard enough, occasionally worked. Dante came to the shop on a Tuesday evening, after closing, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the particular awkwardness of a man who controlled an empire and had no idea what to do with his hands when he was not in it. He sat across from her, at the work table. He watched her sew. After a while he said, quietly, "She would have liked you." Rosa did not look up from her work, but she smiled, slow and real and entirely her own. "I know," she said. She reached across the table without looking and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, careful and certain, the way you hold something you have been looking for a long time and are still not entirely sure you deserve. On her right hand, the ring caught the light. The story of Rosa Vega and Dante Castellano brings us deep lessons about life. First, cruelty disguised as love is still cruelty, and no one deserves to spend a single day believing otherwise. Second, leaving is not failure. Leaving is the bravest seam you will ever sow. Third, healing does not arrive all at once. It arrives the way Rosa cleaned, slowly, from the bottom, 1 honest inch at a time. And finally, the kindness we plant in our darkest moments has a way of finding us again, in the most unexpected hands, at the most unexpected hour. If this story touched your heart, please share it. Somewhere out there, someone is sitting in a cold room telling themselves it will never get better. Show them that it does. Show them that it can. Hit the like button if Rosa's courage moved you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by the person who failed to see it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because we tell these stories every week, and we save the most important ones for the people who stay. How did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of someone you love? Leave a comment below. Every single one gets read. Every single one matters. Thank you for staying until the end. We will see you in the next story.